everyone, my name is Sarah. I'm a registered clinical counselor in BC and the manager of mental wellness programs at the YMCA of Greater Vancouver. Thank you for joining me in this 6th video of the YWellness series. If you haven't seen the earlier videos in this series, I encourage you to go back and check them out. YWellness is a series of 8 short videos that focus on providing education and information from acceptance and commitment therapy, also known as ACT. In the videos so far, I've discussed various ACT strategies and how these can be helpful when it comes to coping with distress, including the most recent video on the concept of the observing self. In this video, I'm going to change gears a little bit and focus on the ACT core concept of values, which are chosen qualities that can never be fully completed, but rather provide ongoing direction in terms of our behaviors and choices. Let's break that down a little. Values are the things that are really important to you. Values are not goals or rules. There's no endpoint to values, but rather they're ongoing commitments. From an ACT perspective, values guide our action steps in life. And when we make decisions based on our values, we find meaning and fulfillment. The other thing about values is that they do require action. There's a doing component to values. When it comes to identifying our values, there are important things that we can consider about in different areas of our life. Those are work and education, which includes workplace and career, education and knowledge or skills development and volunteering. Personal growth and health, so this area of life includes creativity, life skills, physical activity, spirituality, religion, getting out into nature, and more. The other area of life we can consider are our relationships, referring to intimacy, closeness, friendships, romantic relationships, family relationships, relationships with coworkers, and our community. And finally, the area of our life known as leisure, so how you play, relax, find enjoyment, hobbies, or other activities. In order to identify your values, it's recommended to try to pick between 4 and 6 that are most important to you. And again, you can consider those 4 areas in your life that I just mentioned: work and education, personal growth and health, relationships, and leisure. I'm going to give you a list of some possible values. Now, this isn't a comprehensive or exhaustive list, but it includes some examples of values in case you're feeling stuck trying to pick yours. As I go through this list, see if you can pick 1 or 2 that feel like a good fit for you. Now, keep in mind, choosing our values isn't about what should be important to us. It's about what is important to us. So, for example, when you hear the value of caring, this sounds nice, and you might find yourself having the thought, oh, that should be one of my values. There's no such thing as should with values. There's no good values, there's no bad values. There's just the values that feel like a good fit for you. Now, some of us might have similar values and some of us might have differing values. So, with that said, here's a short list of possible values in alphabetical order: acceptance, adventure, authenticity, challenge, compassion, contribution, cooperation, equality, freedom, honesty, humor, independence, patience, persistence, respect, responsibility, spirituality, and the list goes on. In this moment, see if you can identify one of the values I mentioned, or feel free to pick one of your own. This should be something that you're familiar with. Maybe you've never thought of it as a value before, but it should be something that you're aware that's important to you. And remember, there's no wrong value. If you're finding it difficult to name a value in this moment, that's totally fine. It usually takes some exploration and reflection. So you can even spend time after this video thinking more about your values. What I really like about values is the proposition that we can start engaging with our values right now. For those of us who struggle with things like anxiety, depression, loneliness, and other forms of distress, We often think that we need to get rid of those things or get them under control before we can find fulfillment and purpose. And what happens then is we end up putting our life on hold because we think it's not under control or I haven't gotten rid of it yet. So instead, values encourages us to connect to the things that are important to us right now, even while we're encountering difficulties. So it's quite an opposite approach. So we can engage with our values when we're nervous, anxious, or sad. We don't have to wait until these feelings or experiences go away. And we can act on these values even in these experiences of distress. And in fact, leaning into our values may help us find meaning, fulfillment, and purpose even when we're struggling. So when it comes to values, the first step is to identify your top 4 to 6. Why such a specific number? Well, we want to try to limit our values because if we have too many, we might forget them and they might not be a helpful tool for us when we consider making decisions or engaging in behaviors. So, when it comes to identifying your values, you can try a few different things. You can ask yourself some pretty big life questions like, what do I really want in life? What's important to me? What do I want to stand for? Those are big questions. You can reflect on what your life would look like if you could remove that thing that you feel like is holding you back. If you could remove your anxiety, your sadness, your loneliness. If you could get yourself out of this job that you currently might not like. What would your life look like if you weren't limited in those ways? You can also go back to those 4 different areas I mentioned: work and education, personal growth and health, relationships and leisure, and name 1 or 2 values for each. Keep in mind, you might have some values that show up in all 4 areas. Values is a part of ACT that derives and guides our behavior change. So from an ACT perspective, it's not enough to contact the present moment, practice acceptance, diffuse from unhelpful thoughts, and take the perspective of the observing self. We also need to behave and engage in life in a certain way. And that certain way is in alignment with our values. Considering our values becomes important when we're struggling to make a decision. We often make decisions to either escape an uncomfortable emotion. So for example, I don't want to feel anxious, so I'm not going to go to that place. But when it comes to values, we want to make decisions based on the things that are really important to us. And when we do that, we might be more willing to have some of that distress and anxiety that comes up because we know it's connected to something that's really important to us. In the next video on committed action, I'm going to talk about how we can take action steps and engage in behaviors in alignment with our values. So for now, just focus on trying to identify and explore what your values are. That's going to wrap up this video on values. Stay tuned for the next video on committed action. My name is Sarah. Thanks for joining me.